Hey there, welcome to episode 43 of the FFS Talk audio program. I am your host, Dan Hugo. We are recording this on September 19, 2024. It's Thursday here in Vegas. Happy Thursday, or whenever you're listening to this. And it's around 10:13 a.m., right around there. If you've never taken part in the FFS Talk audio program, ideally it would be a show with guests. That will happen someday. I kind of envision this as a collection of topics so that if someone did want to be a guest, talk about one of these topics, they could flip through a few episodes of relevant commentary, planting some seeds. FFS Talk is a program, audio program, about things that work and things that do not, and what we could do about them. As the saying goes, do not curse the darkness, light a candle. Nowadays you would bring a flashlight, LED of course. My allergies continue to vex me, although lately it's been more of the particulates in the air, smoke from various fires. I think everything's on fire at this point. So tolerate my ailing voice. It's normally, I guess the word would be done by now. The summer of whatever it is that floats around in the air in Vegas is usually not friendly to me, but it's going into, as I mentioned, September 19th already. Geez. So on that note, today's episode is about intellectual curiosity, in case you were wondering. Wherever you found this audio program, hopefully you can see the show notes. There are 4 links in the show notes, 2 shameless self-promotion, 2 relevant for today's episode. The summary is something I will read right now. Have you noticed that people seem to prefer to accept information presented to them as at face value, assuming it is factual, correct, and safe, and then they share it with someone else to continue the cycle? Have you noticed that? We have more access to more information today than on any day previous, and that is almost certainly true every day. If you don't believe me, check for yourself, will you? The links for today's episode, as I said, 2 shameless self-promotion links. You do not have to buy anything or spend any money. Buy me a coffee, despite the name. buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. That's DANHUGO. And Ko-fi.com, KO-fi.com/DanHugo. These are third-party websites. I can use them to post links and other content that points back to my 4 weekly audio programs. They're all different. I have some links to some of my favorite coffees, somewhat ironically, I suppose, on my buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo profile page. If everything goes to plan, I've been talking about this forever, but it's just simply not been at the top of the priority list. But kind of website, podcast, audio program, podcast, website, based on I can launch a WordPress site. That's not what I want to do. I'm a software engineer, not a doctor. So there's an architecture, there's some ideas. It fits into a larger plan, yada, 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 all rationalizations. But in the meantime, as is common with many open source project development individuals and teams, both buymeacoffee.com and Ko-fi.com, KO-fi.com, they both make appearances as a way to support small, individual, independent, usually software projects. Sometimes you'll see them on Medium, author profiles. They just float around. So that's why I have them on here, because people are generally aware of those brands. And you are, again, not obligated in any way to give me any money. Although rest assured, if you do, it will go towards coffee, which does power all of my projects. Nothing else, only the projects. The rest, everything else takes money. The next 2 links are related to today's episode. The first is a Wikipedia article about, wait for it, intellectual curiosity. This is merely so that you can be on the same page, I suppose. Everybody has like a little bit different take, I think. I think intellectual curiosity is, well, if you click on that link and you read about it, you probably have a certain amount of intellectual curiosity. If you take my word for it, we need to talk. Epistemology, another Wikipedia page about this section, this this sector, this field of philosophy. It's basically the search for knowledge. Intellectual curiosity is epistemic curiosity, I believe, is the other way of saying that. Epistemology, hey, I would like to know more. There had to be a certain amount of epistemic curiosity or intellectual curiosity back when philosophy was being invented. Why else would people be looking up at stars when they should have been looking around them for predators, right? But I just got to know what's up with that one shiny star over there. So we get where we have, where we are, where we have reached. We have become what we have become in no small part because of the intellectual curiosity of the standards. I don't know where that came from. The shoulders of the giant. We stand upon the shoulders of giants who, luckily for us, lived and breathed with intellectual curiosity. And that is why you're listening to this right now, probably on a phone or mobile device of some sort, maybe on a computer, connected to the internet. The list of things goes on, all interconnected and built upon the achievements of others who, luckily, pursued their intellectual curiosities. So on that, let's get the show started. First, let us get this out of the way. I don't really like talking about politics. This is election season. It is a doozy, and there's more than the usual amount of dirty tricks going on. Or is there? I would argue it's about the same. Dirty tricks have been around for a long time. If you read history, which you should, probably the only, speaking of presidential election season, right? Probably the only president that didn't really get the full brunt of all this kind of stuff was the first one, George Washington. Pretty much unopposed. He had just won a war, won our independence, all that. He wasn't a particularly stellar president, he had some good sensibilities, but, he was okay. But, when you're the first one, nobody really knows what to do and what to expect. But every year since, Adams and Jefferson were at each other like Harris and Trump, I suppose. So yeah, it's nothing new. Is this worse than normal? I would argue it's about the same. We just have more access to all of it. There is nothing that anyone can say or do anywhere that you will not hear about 1,000 times from all angles, with all agendas, with all leanings, with all motivated reasoning. So it seems like a lot more, but I would argue with no proof whatsoever, so you're going to have to prove me wrong on your own, that it's probably about the same. You just have more access to it. You have more access to information every day, like I said, but tons and tons of that information is useless and designed to shape your opinions and views of the world. YouTube, Twitter, and a few other outlets, so many of them calling themselves news, are amplifying, shaping, and regurgitating talking points and excerpts for clout. They either want to brag about being in the know. They're obviously monetizing some content now and then, so they make some money, especially if you can work out some deals with Tenet Media. Or maybe something else. Maybe there's some other reason. Personal pride, who knows? All of the usual suspects are at play here with motivated reasoning, like I said, confirmation bias, availability, availability heuristics, the whole thing, all of the biases and things to consider, the Mott and Bailey, all of it, everything, the whole thing. And one of my concerns for today is the apparent lack, or at least diminished presence of, intellectual curiosity. So I'm not going to focus on eating of pets or not answering questions, not really having a good answer to a simple question that everybody knows is coming, and that applies to both of the top two candidates. It should be pretty straightforward. It's unfortunate that it has to devolve into silliness. And it's not exactly 50-50, but there could be a lot of maturity that would lead to really good and interesting answers to those with enough intellectual curiosity to ask them and to see if they're right. So let's take some passes at this previously, which we did. On this very audio program, we have talked about online debates, which are completely performative in most cases. And that does include the one with no audience. The second presidential debate, performative. That's all they are. There's really no substance anymore. So there's really nothing to, you can fact check zingers and performance. Taking mobile phones out of schools, we talked about that. Generally accepting anything as news, talked about that. Historical context, talked about that. There have been some more. So this is something we need to ponder. Now, why am I focused on this all the time? Because not knowing or trusting too easily or limiting access to information, these are all variations on a theme. So they're good topics to talk about, discuss, and ponder, but they all really come down to the individual level of intellectual curiosity that you or I or someone else possesses. One of the underlying, perhaps unifying issues here is the presence or absence of the curiosity. One needs to dive deeper to consider who is making which claims, the arguments for and against, whether we are hearing what we want to hear. You might not be hearing, so pick your favorite sensory input. Maybe you're reading it, maybe you're watching it, maybe you're listening to it, maybe you're smelling it. I don't know. And do we reject what we do not find appealing, which does not agree with us? That's our confirmation bias. Perhaps most important, we should always be on the lookout for decisions being made for us, action taken for us, but really to us, and whether we are actually coming out ahead or perhaps we are simply convinced that we might. We might come out ahead, but we really don't. And then we forget that we didn't, and then we believe it again when we're told that we will. In other words, what is the cost of acceptance at face value somewhere down the road? So what do you do? How are you doing? When you hear something that sounds a little bit off, maybe too extreme, perhaps outlandish, what happens next? Do you do your own research? Put quotes around that. Whatever that means lately. Do you discuss with like-minded friends? Do you discuss with non-like-minded friends and argue? Do you seek information from subject matter experts, whether online or in person? In our modern, and I don't mean Joe Rogan, in our modern era of deepfakes and now almost unlimited access to ever-improving AI tools to create still images and convincing video, and these will only get better. And you and anyone you don't know has ridiculous levels of access to ridiculous levels of technology. How about that? Even better. Everything is only going to get better. Essentially, the cost is zero, either literally exactly zero for some free stuff, or essentially zero, given what's possible nowadays. Do you take a second look? Do you take a moment to ponder? Does that look right? Is that a real image? You really can't get away with checking for 6, 7, 8 fingers, things like this. More and more reflections in eyeballs, correct digit counts, more realistic scenes, video with correct physics, with continuity. These will all evolve. Surely incoming emails that don't look right are only getting better as well. The old school spam for beginners, we can all spot those, we know, especially if they put a bunch of random stuff at the bottom to confuse the Bayesian spam filter. Have you ever been tempted to click on that link from an email that looks right, sounds right, and maybe comes from a name that doesn't seem familiar, but it also doesn't seem fake? Maybe the email address doesn't match the name, but that might have been some, who knows, maybe it's from a weird domain in another country. Oh, just click on it. That's just going to get worse too. You won't be quite sure. And as more and more personally identifying information is compromised, I think at this point now, you're almost, if not completely guaranteed to have been vacuumed up in the national data systems breach. Something like, was it 7 billion? No, it wasn't 7 billion. That's the world population. It was well over 1 billion records. So there were deceased. There were multiple records for non-deceased people. Just every way of compromising that data was done. I will say, I checked on one of the see if you've been breached, pwned, as they say, and I was in there with an old phone number was how I showed up. So that's not good. That's why I don't take calls anymore. We need to know how to connect the dots. Some of what we will need. Oh, by the way, before I forget, the emails will eventually be turned into voice calls. They will be nearly perfect. They will feed you your own information back to you because it will know. They'll just mention, oh, is this your correct address? Is your previous address? They can refer to some of your content that you post on your social media accounts. They can make it sound very familiar. Maybe the voice will be familiar. Make it sound like a friend or family member. How do they do that? Well, listen to podcasts. Anyone who posts reels or YouTube shorts or whatever, voice samples can be lifted and recreated with only a few seconds of sample. So that will start to happen. You'll receive 1 or 10, if you haven't already, more. So something we all need to do something we need to make a bigger part of our personal analytical toolbox, if you like, is the ability to connect past events from our own experiences to what is happening in front of us. Best of this is in your own direct experience, of course, your earned wisdom, first-person insight, but it may just as well be facts that you've accumulated and that have been shown over time to be true. If somebody tells you something and tells it to you again sometime later, and you hear it from somebody else, and it's sort of like provably true or falsifiable, if you like, eventually you'll start to realize that, oh, okay, that's true. And that other thing, not so much. Are tariffs good? Generally, no. That one is probably the worst thing I've ever heard. And it is a good example, although I don't want to go down this road. But this morning I was reading some Adam Smith because that's how I roll. Tariffs are just not good. Tariffs are a bad idea. Limiting trade in general is not good. There are already trade limitations in place for various reasons, different values of currency and supply chain limitations and manufacturing issues at various locations where things are manufactured, except for here in America where they are not. But yeah, tariffs are being described in a way that is not accurate. So if you begin to know that what you have learned, what you have heard and been told over time is correct and true, then hopefully you can apply that to what's happening in front of you. Of course, the noise level is increasing faster than the information level is out in the world. So for every day that you have access to more information, you have even better access to mis and disinformation, and that stuff is piling up faster than we can really fathom. And with AI-generated content destined to take over the internet, which is kind of true, not kidding, and once it starts eating its own tail, or any variation of that idea, and people are being encouraged, by the way, hey, here's how you make money having AI write books for you and then publish them on Amazon, have a computer voice read it for Audible. You'll be raking in the dough, not doing anything original or creative, but that will become the food the machine eats, and then it just goes south. It's almost like mad cow disease. Mad cow disease starts to spread really quickly when the feed that is given to the cows might include some cow. So order the chicken. So we need to be able to connect that past with the future, the present. We're all really going to have to get back to the first principles. That means like looking stuff up, like we don't have a phone in our pocket, going to the library, reading a book, reading a magazine, reading an article. Read the article, not just the summary. Don't watch Joe Rogan and think that's me doing my research. Sorry to be so anti-Joe Rogan, but yipes. Joe Rogan's bad. His guests are often worse. But this does mean connecting those dots for ourselves or with people we know and trust. So has this ever happened to you? Have you ever seen anything like this? Does that look right? Is that video? Did you see this? Is that a real video? Hopefully you will have a circle of humans that you can have these interactions and discussions with. Most important in this context, people who have no dots to connect. That means younger people most likely, but anyone who's in this situation, so not enough lived experience, not very observant, lacking intellectual curiosity, they will need to learn how. They will need to learn how to do this now, or and how to be critical and analytical thinkers about what they are being told. They have to be critical and analytical about everything. That should always be true. What they are finding online or in a mailbox or overheard out and about. Naivete is adorable, but not practical. So learn to question things, and even more important, learn how to get to the bottom, how to get the answer, how to fact check. By the way, fact checking is not evil. It's not bad. It's not something to be cursed. Fact checking is literally the opposite of that. Don't forget that. I'm sorry, I totally skipped to the end. Analytical thinking is So what do we do now? Where are we going to go? Where do we go from here? So analytical thinking is going to be essential. It's already an essential life skill today, but it's only going to be more so. Mostly because it always has been, like I just said. That's what happens when I get ahead of my own writing. But is rarely properly taught. So it's often not where it needs to be because it's not something that's included in a curriculum of the typical maybe public school, but maybe I don't really hang out at elementary schools so much, so I can only surmise. But also because automation and AI will always be faster than puny humans. We are going to need to know what is coming at us. Imagine AI is like a hippopotamus. Oh, they're so adorable. They're so cute. They can outrun you. They can outswim you, and they will kill you. But they're cute. Sometimes. Critical and analytical thinking. Developing a sense of what probably needs some additional research and establishing a personal sensibility about what any of this means is going to have to be a substantial focus in our schools. It's something we are going to have to instill in every class, right? When I was in junior high school, I took wood shop and metal shop, sort of introductory. We were in 7th grade after all. I also took shop in 8th grade, but I also took home economics. I worked in the library, took a language elective, got put into the upper level math classes, took advanced biology, all that stuff. So I had a sprinkling of analytics in there just because I was thirsting for knowledge. Working in a library, being surrounded by books is not a bad thing. Check it out. But in our schools, taking away mobile devices doesn't help. I did a whole episode of that on re-engineering the rewiring, I think it was. I think it was episode 31. I know that because I looked it up previously, but I don't remember the title exactly. But episode 31. Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T, he has good ideas about the analytics, the correlations, and the potential causations of increased youth anxiety. But I would be concerned that, there is anxiety, but we're not teaching them how to use the technology defensively or in a defensive manner. That is, be prepared for deception, for misinformation, for information that is performative for the sake of money. It's not always real life. Why should you feel depressed because someone else is making money on your viewing of their content, et cetera, et cetera? So taking away phones only removes an avenue for teaching or perhaps developing these skills, including intellectual curiosity, the ability to look up. I got to tell you this. When I was, I worked in the library when I was in junior high, but I had been going to libraries for a long time. I learned how to read when I was very young, and I haven't stopped yet. So if any of you recall from back in the old days, when you'd actually have to go to the library, you'd actually have to find a book. You'd actually have to flip through newspapers. You'd have to, are you sitting down? You'd actually have to go look at microfiche. You might have to ask a librarian if you could access the special collection. All of those things are now available online. You have access to all of them. And yet you are going to tell students learning that they should not access these online resources. So it's not a question of having a mobile phone in your pocket. It's a question of what they do with it. And if they're being taught that they're bad to have, technology is bad, they're going to use it, they're going to access it anyway, and they're just going to, to avoid it, they're not going to go, I'm going to sneak a look at my phone so I can read this Wikipedia article on epistemology. That's not happening. But these are skills that the skills and the sensibility need to develop in the younger age range, because there will be more and more noisy and bad actors to contend with, and fewer authority figures to trust. Once you're out of school, you can't really go ask the teacher. We hope we can trust the teacher. Here in Vegas, that is not always a great proposition. The odds tend to favor a good teacher. I would prefer a great teacher. I would definitely prefer that we don't have as many. If a teacher is going to be on the front page of a news website, we need better reasons. I think here in Vegas, there was another teacher arrested. It was either this week or late last week. That's all. Just another one. That person's probably not sharing intellectual curiosity pointers. I'm going to get some water. Yikes. We're on the last bullet item. I need to figure out this voice thing. I'm going to do a whole episode on that when I do. Don't forget the philosophy component. I jokingly said something about the Wikipedia article on epistemology, but really, flip through it. Get some ideas. Epistemology should not be a defense mechanism in a hostile information landscape. In other words, the quest for knowledge should not be purely defensive. It's a factor. The quest for knowledge is a part of surviving in the future world, which will be a fake information fire hose. We as humanity could begin to recall the upsides, knowing things, to actually understand, or to maybe be curious enough to put in the effort required to gain that understanding. Take something apart, put it back together, learn how to cook that thing that you've always just bought. What are the ingredients? How do they come together? Ooh, it tastes better with something else, right? Learning, understanding, the curiosity, the desire, the need to learn how things work, how the world works, that tariffs are bad. Teach the children well, they say, the song lyric goes. But don't forget, make learning and understanding cooler than TikTok and whatever distraction is coming next. And maybe, just maybe, epistemology will indeed be something that students will be pondering. It's not so bad to know things. You don't have to sit and doom scroll, as they say. You don't have to be performative. You don't have to fake it on Instagram. You don't have to be a grammer, whatever they call them, igram, IG. You don't have to be a TikToker for the rest of your life, and that's the end of it. Like, that's what I want to be when I grow up. There is more to it. And they've tried this with video games, and I believe it has worked. So there comes a point when young people are playing video games that someone will say, you can make your own games. And if you do it well enough, you might put down this game and play the game that you developed. And if you're lucky, like 1 million other people will do the same thing. And that turns out to be a pretty good deal. And that I've anecdotally heard stories of this leading to careers in the game development world. I myself, in my daily activities with my nonprofit, and just in general, my interactions with people over the last couple of years, so recent memory, the last couple of weeks and months, I'll leave it there. I don't want to be too specific, but I wonder aloud if people who should be intellectually curious actually are, or if they're maybe going through the motions. I think back to the times when I was learning how computers worked, how cars worked. There's nothing really as educational as taking something apart or building something. And again, this applies to cooking. This applies to any sort of crafts. I've told people before, excuse me, I've told people before, and I don't remember exactly when. I think I might have been around age 10. My mother used to, I'm going to say, crochet more, because she used to crochet since I've been around. So crocheting is the creative use of yarn and a stick to make blankets and clothing. It's pretty crazy, actually. Unless you know how weaving works, then it's like, oh, it's just a variation. So crocheting, There was no knitting at the time. There were knitting needles, but knitting didn't really seem to be going on in our house. And then macrame, I'll let you look that up yourself, but macrame, knitting and crocheting. So one day I said, I want to learn how to do those. and my mom was like, okay. So I learned how to do the things, and I made a couple of squares crocheting, and I macrameed something, which is basically the tying of knots. You can do all kinds of things with macrame, which again, knots, tangles, weaves, these things have been around for thousands of years. It was fascinating to me. I did not continue those because I was not, they weren't for me. I wasn't totally excited by them, but I had the intellectual curiosity to ask and to learn how this works. And so I'm at least somewhat familiar. And you can apply this to just about anything. You don't have to be interested in geopolitical, geoeconomic, geographic. You don't have to take a proactive interest in these things. You could have some pretty basic understanding. You could take a quick course on Brilliant or other, this is not a plug. There's plenty of places to visit online or in person where you can actually learn some of the ins and outs. I'll tell you another example, which I may have mentioned a long time ago. When the pandemic was coming, like just as it started becoming likely, and I could probably look up when I did exactly, we started seeing that John Hopkins infograph that everybody was recreating. Like, oh, look, I'm a web developer. I made a copy of that. So they were using, what is it, BI? Is it, I can't remember. It's a Microsoft tool to build dashboards like that. I can't remember what it's done. No, Power, is it Power? Not Power Builder. It's something, Interface Builder, something. Anyway, they were using this tool to extract data and to plot cases and fatalities per state, per whatever. So, very exciting. And we started hearing words like sensitivity, specificity, quarantine, isolation, R naught. And I was like, let me see. Oh, look, I can take a course that's taught by or offered by Johns Hopkins. Nobody ever says that S, Johns Hopkins. Offered by Johns Hopkins. Sort of not a class, you're not going to get credit for it. It was sort of an audit class. I want to say it was like 12 hours, maybe 10 hours. A couple of video lectures, self-paced, a couple of tests just to, quiz yourself. Epidemiology, almost like epistemology. Epidemiology is the statistics and the study of the spread of disease and spread and impact and all that. So after I took that course, there were some things to ponder. First of all, to keep misusing quarantine and isolate. You quarantine if you may have been exposed, if you've been proximal. You isolate if you've definitely been exposed because you need to get a test result. But if you're under quarantine, you're just waiting because you may have been exposed. But if isolating, you have been exposed and are likely to be sick. Maybe you're showing symptoms, right? You isolate to stop, to definitely stop or limit spread. You quarantine to determine whether you need to isolate. How about that? So they were misusing those terms. Sensitivity, specificity, what do those really mean? Excuse me. And the R naught stuff. What is herd immunity? Why does it work? I don't know if you can hear that. Production by a street motorcycle. So I was curious to know, just so I could speak the language that I was hearing on the news. And it was educational. It was very useful. And it doesn't really take that much effort. It was free. So I think being informed, just as I took a SNAP training course when I lived in Sunnyvale. I don't know if I've mentioned this before either. Sunnyvale Neighbors Actively Prepared. It was a city government paid program to educate civilian first responders in the case of emergency. Sunnyvale was in a liquefaction zone where I lived, so a good earthquake would have us all sliding into the bay. But basic triage, search and rescue, command center formation, communicating with emergency services. As the saying goes, in the case of a really severe emergency, you should be prepared for about 4 days. And you don't want to be in the place where they get there on day one, because that means you're in the worst of it. So I took the SNAP class. When I moved to Vegas, I took the CERT class, the Community Emergency Response Team, which is a FEMA implementation of what SNAP was. So it's the federal government and state governments, and in this case, City of Las Vegas Emergency Management Office manages the overall program for probably all of Clark County to learn how first response works, civilian first responders. You understand what happens in the process. And I will tell you, to be honest, when I had my house fire, April, whatever it was, 2013, I think it was April 8th, there was nothing other than the fact that the house I was living in was on fire. There was nothing about what followed that surprised me in the slightest because of the SNAP training. And I knew where the fire station was. I knew a couple of the firefighters between the SNAP training and the Leadership Sunnyvale course I took, which is yet more learning about how a city functions. So yeah, these resources are available. They're usually free or reasonably priced. You will have a greater understanding of what's going on around you. And then when you start hearing things, you'll say, that doesn't, I went to the class for this. That doesn't sound right. So the truth is out there, as Mulder might tell you, or he might have just posted on his wall. You sometimes have to seek it out. But I do have real concerns about how we access information and whether we have that intellectual curiosity that it takes to deep dive, to really find out, like, what's going on here? Does this really work? Do I believe what I hear? Does podcaster A know more than podcaster B, but B is more funny? Maybe I'll go with B. It's a crazy world. I hope you listen to smarter people than me when it comes to this stuff. So please do that as well. In the meantime, don't forget to check out my shameless self-promotion links. You do not have to spend any money. I cannot stress that enough. Just to know that you know is gold. Buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo. I do have links to my various programs. That's this program, FFS Talk. There's Tuesday is the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program. Wednesday is the Quaggling Sand audio program. That's sort of story time. FFS Talk on Thursdays and Cafe Genius Impresarios on Fridays. And as I was saying this, I was thinking, I don't know if I should say the days because they could change, but you get the idea. 4 different programs every week. Cafe Genius Impresarios is about our entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem, which I actually find really interesting because if you ever want to start a business, start a company, create your own unicorn, the next Google, there's a lot of stuff to think about. I'm not plugging that idea and I'm not offering you any help to do that, but it is an interesting thing to ponder. That's another show where I had a few guests early on. Booking people to participate in things like this in Vegas is a challenge until you become famous. So I need to have more listeners or something like that. And that is where I will leave it for today. Today's a shorter show than normal, and I was rambling at the end, not to pad it out, but because I felt like I just had more to say and I didn't write it down. So there you go. And if you are intellectually curious, I do write the show. I do write it in sections, and I try to have 3 bullet items per section. Rule of 3. And I try not to go too long. I can kind of judge that it'll be about an hour. Yeah, I would have said what I wrote here would have lasted until now. But on the other hand, it actually lasted until about 10 minutes ago. And then I realized I didn't really give any good concrete examples. So read a book, stop watching TikTok. I consume Instagram Reels now and then. I mostly follow Vegas people to see what's going on around here because our news resources are limited. So it's just another angle. I don't believe either. So if I put them together, Instagram Reels about local happenings. Raised in Vegas, I believe. She's born and raised in Vegas, and I believe she's a radio DJ. So she's cool and talks about stuff going on in her hometown. So that's fun. So yeah, there are ways to kind of gather your own pieces of data and construct your own information picture. And that, if you've been listening to the Impresarios audio program, you know that's something that I'm working on as well. That is where I'll leave you today. Thanks for listening. Thanks for putting up with my smoky voice and crossing my fingers that it will get better. If you want to cross yours, thanks.